What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we've got our first 2022 NFL mock draft of the season, and I figured what better time to do this than now. The NFL Combine has concluded. There have been some huge trades in the last couple of days, so this iteration of the draft, our 1.0 mock, will be very, very interesting. There won't be any trades in this draft just because we've still got free agency. There's going to be a lot of changes. So I kind of want to see how things stand with these teams at their current spots. Either way, though, I think it will be very, very interesting. And let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree with these picks? And more importantly, what do you want your teams to do? I am all ears. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. But with that being said, let's get right into it. And first overall, we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, what we do know is this pick will not be a quarterback. And yes, even though the majority of teams picking first overall usually go that way, well, the Jaguars got Trevor Lawrence last year, so that will not be the case. And instead, here, I think you build around Trevor Lawrence, and you do so by fortifying the offensive line. And who's the best offensive lineman here in this draft class? Who's the most versatile guy? In my opinion, it's Ikem Ekwonu from North Carolina State. I love his versatility. I think he's similar to Rashawn Slater last season. You know, huge upside. He's ready to contribute from day one. Versatility, tackle, guard ability as well. So I love that. And I'm going Ekwonu here. Yes, there's a lot of different directions they can go with, but I tend to think it's going to be offensive lineman and probably either Ekwonu or Evan Neal from Alabama. I personally have Ekwonu a little bit higher. Next, we go to number 2, the Detroit Lions here. And yes, they do have a need at quarterback. Jared Goff is not the answer there, but I think this is way, way too early for a quarterback. I would even argue that the Detroit Lions, can wait until the last pick overall and still, in the first round, that is, and still get a decent quarterback prospect because the grades on the quarterbacks in this draft class are not all that great. That's why if you didn't get a rookie quarterback in last year's class, you're kind of scratching your head this year in 2022. And I think picking a quarterback way too early could be a detriment. Second overall, I think that's way too early. Even though there's probably going to be a quarterback that goes in the top 10, I think you can go a lot of different directions here that have, more safety and not as much bust potential. So for that reason, I'm looking elsewhere. So here I'm looking on the defensive side of the football, specifically edge rusher. And to me, it's either Aiden Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeaux. I personally think Aiden Hutchinson is a little bit more polished. Thibodeaux maybe has a higher ceiling, but a little bit more raw. And also it does help that Hutchinson has that Michigan connection. So I'm going Hutchinson here for the Detroit Lions. Then at number 3, I think this is where you could argue Houston Texans. This is where the NFL draft really begins because the Texans can absolutely go any which damn way with this pick. There's a reason why PFF says every position is a need, for God's sakes, for the Houston Texans. Now, what I do know is it probably won't be quarterback because the Texans are trying to force, Mills as being the answer. Deshaun Watson is going to be moving on from the Houston Texans. Way too much drama there. I don't think Mills is all that great personally, but doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the Houston Texans believe, and they're probably going to give Mills a chance for better or for worse. So that means this pick could be on the offensive line. It could be best player available, somebody like Kyle Hamilton, or it could be edge rusher. And I do think this early on, probably you give the nod to edge rusher. It's kind of that premium position after quarterback, alongside offensive linemen. So my number 2 guy here is Kayvon Thibodeaux. I was thinking about him second overall. Instead, he goes 1 pick later to the Houston Texans. Now, 4th overall, we've got the New York Jets. And to me, this is simple. Look, you invested an early pick in Zach Wilson last year. Do the same thing the Jaguars are going to do. Do the same thing that the Chargers did with Justin Herbert. That's add offensive lineman help. My next best offensive lineman is Evan Neal. And that's exactly what they do here by adding, stalwart on that offensive lineman to help protect Zach Wilson. Afterwards, we go to the New York Giants, and it's a similar story here. Yes, Daniel Jones is probably not the answer, but the Giants are going to give him one last crack at it. And again, you've got, the weapons arguably with wide receivers, we'll see what happens with Evan Ingram, with Saquon Barkley. But I feel like I was seeing highlight after highlight of the offensive line get embarrassed last year. One of these first two picks for the Giants, either 5 or 7, has to be an offensive lineman. And I think you have to go lineman here because the Panthers are in desperate need of an offensive lineman and they pick right after you. So to me, Charles Cross is that next best available lineman. He's not quite as sexy as Neil Kwanu, but I do think he's a very solid guy here and deserves top 10 consideration. Next up, we've got the Panthers, who we mentioned briefly. And for Carolina, unfortunately, I have the pleasure of being a lifelong Panthers fan. So I can tell you that last year I was screaming at the top of my lungs, draft Rashawn Slater, draft, for God's sakes, Rashawn Slater. Instead, what do the Panthers do? Okay, they draft a cornerback in J.C. Horn. That's cool. And they also trade way too much draft capital for Sam Darnold, who hadn't really shown us anything so far in his NFL career. And then they pick up his option. They could have also drafted a backup as emergency in like a Justin Fields, for example. Didn't do that either. They could have traded back and tried to get some more draft capital. Didn't do that either. So what are they going to do now? Well, they're probably going to try and save their asses, this coaching staff will, and bring in an inexperienced rookie quarterback that has no business being drafted this early on. And I think the guy that it will be Kenny Pickett at the quarterback position. Yes, somebody like a Malik Willis had an awesome combine, but the Panthers have been more so linked to Kenny Pickett. Their owner, David Tepper, is a guy that has that Pittsburgh connection. So I think it's going to be Kenny Pickett here. Honestly, you could go offensive line, but if this thing plays out the way I have it right now with 3 offensive linemen going in the first 5 picks, I think there's a big drop-off afterwards. So Pickett is the selection here for the Panthers. Next up, Giants again. They went offensive lineman with their first pick. You could argue they could go offensive lineman again, but I think it's going to be tough to pass up on a guy like Kyle Hamilton, potentially, the best overall player, the safest player in this draft class. Yes, he's a safety, so I don't quite value him as high, but getting towards here, the back end of the first 10 picks, I think this could be a good slot for Kyle Hamilton. And honestly, I think Giants fans would be very, very happy with this start to the draft. Next up, we've got the Atlanta Falcons. And obviously here, the Falcons are a team that can go, again, in a lot of different directions. All of a sudden, wide receivers an even bigger need. And if you're saying, well, look, Calvin Ridley wasn't going to be on the Falcons either way, what's the issue? Well, the issue is that at least you would have thought they could get some draft capital in return for him if they traded him. But now, since Ridley was too busy, playing on FanDuel, he's going to miss the entire 2022 NFL season. So what do you do with the wide receiver position? You don't have Ridley. Russell Gage is a free agent. It's absolutely barren. And honestly, I don't know what to tell you. They also have other needs here. I'm looking at cornerback. I'm looking at the offensive line. I'm looking at, the defensive line. But I guess I'll go wide receiver. I also think, the Falcons, similar to the Texans, are a team that can go any which way. The defense has been an Achilles heel for, I feel like, years now. But you got to give, Matt Ryan somebody to throw the football to. It can't be just Kyle Pitts. My number 1 wide receiver in this draft class is Drake London. I'm going to go with him to the Atlanta Falcons here, but I'm sure that's a pick that's going to be, up for discussion for a while. Next up, we've got the Seattle Seahawks here, and I do think they benefit from this being a draft where we're not introducing any trades because that means somebody like a Malik Willis drops to them. And obviously they made huge waves by trading away Russell Wilson and, also cutting Bobby Wagner. This team all of a sudden has plenty of needs, and they might be one of the worst teams in football. There's no guarantee that they can add a quarterback in free agency via trade or something like that. I think they probably elect to go with a younger guy, and Malik Willis is a guy that's been linked to them. Again, he had an awesome combine. He's big, physical. He's a rusher as well. Some Cam Newton comparisons. I think the Seahawks would be happy to get Willis at this point in time. Next up, we've got we got the New York Jets, who already made one selection with Evan Neal, offensive line. So here, what do? I think we're going to see the Jets go on the defensive side of the football. Yes, they could go wide receiver, but let's not forget Salah does have that defensive mentality. And, what better than getting a guy that can captain your defense at the linebacker position? There's a couple guys that I really like in Nakobe Dean and Devin Lloyd. Personally, I have Devin Lloyd a little bit higher, but again, it's splitting hairs. You can also go edge rusher as well. But I think linebacker may be a little bit of a bigger need. I'm going to go Devin Lloyd at this point in time. Next up, we go to Washington. You still see, funny enough, that quarterback is an area of need for them. But they did trade for Carson Wentz, so at least that's a Band-Aid for now. Offensive line, when you have Carson Wentz, you can never have enough good offensive linemen. I feel like Washington has a really good defensive line, so maybe not necessarily there. I think you're looking at either linebacker or safety or just really basically any secondary help. And the guys that I'm considering at this point in time are Derek Singletary or somebody like a Ahmad Gardner. Personally, I think that Ahmad Gardner is the best cornerback in this draft class, even prior to his combine performance. And again, you can never have enough good secondary help. I'm going Ahmad Gardner here to the Washington Commanders now. Next up, we've got the Minnesota Vikings, and again, similar situation. I'm assuming Kirk Cousins will stay there. We'll see if that's the case or not. But if it is, obviously probably not going to see quarterback here. Instead, a huge area of need, in my opinion, for them is secondary. It's been the case for a while. Yes, you could also argue offensive line. But I think the value here for secondary is a little bit better, especially with Derek Stingley Jr. from LSU. Apologies. He's a guy that a lot of people before, the combine and a month ago had as their top cornerback. I think he's a little bit raw, a little bit more inconsistent than Ahmad Gardner, but he's still my number 2 guy in this draft class, and I'm going with him here as the pick for the Vikings. Next up, we've got the Cleveland Browns. And for them, I really do think wide receiver is a huge area of need. It's not just a position that's been talked up. You lost Odell Beckham via trade. Probably not going to retain Jarvis Landry. You don't have too many other options. Get a bona fide stud here. Go to the Ohio State kind of pool in Garrett Wilson, a local kid. A lot of people have him as their number 1 wide receiver. Had a really nice combine as well. So I think Wilson would be a nice fit for the Browns. Afterwards, we go to the Baltimore Ravens. And here, I think you could argue that with the Ravens, they need offensive lineman help, they need defensive lineman help, and also secondary help. Secondary and D-line are kind of the top 2 needs. In terms of, kind of next best player available, I do like Trent McDuffie at the defensive back position. There's also some interior defensive linemen that I really do like as well. And honestly here, I just think that the Ravens are taking way too many hits in the secondary. I think it's a little bit higher area of concern, and there's going to be a run on these cornerbacks. So for that reason, I am going Trent McDuffie at this point in time. Next up, we go to the Philadelphia Eagles, 15th, 16th overall. They've got 2 picks in a row here, and one of these picks, in my opinion, should be a linebacker. Nakobe Dean is my next best available linebacker. I'm going with him here as one of the picks. And then I think Tyler Linderbaum is one of my favorite offensive lineman prospects. Jason Kelce isn't going to play forever. Let Linderbaum learn behind Kelce, even though I think he could start day 1. But here, this is an awesome replacement option for Kelce whenever he does move on or whenever the Eagles decide to move on from him. I love Linderbaum, and I'd be very happy for him as a fit with the Eagles. Next, we go to the LA Chargers, and to me here, I think wide receiver could have been a bigger area of need, but you retain Mike Williams. You also add Khalil Mack via trade, but you need some help on the interior of that defensive line. And a guy in terms of the defensive tackles that had a huge combine is Jordan Davis. He absolutely blew it up. He's a physical specimen, and I think he's going to be the top defensive lineman selected from Georgia, a little bit ahead of Devontae Wyatt, his teammate in Georgia. Next, we go to the New Orleans Saints, and I really do think the Saints could go a number of different ways here. They could go quarterback because, well, is Jameis Winston the answer? Probably not. Is Taysom Hill the answer? Hell no. Is Ian Book the answer? No, probably not. The question is what this draft class has to offer at that position any better? You could go wide receiver. That's been an area of need for a while. It's just Michael Thomas and then everybody else. We'll see if Michael Thomas kind of says everything is okay now and stays in New Orleans. It maybe seems like that way. But I think here it probably will come back to quarterback or wide receiver. I'll go quarterback here, but I think it's going to be one that I go back and forth on just because, look, there's a lot of free agent options at wide receivers, so I wouldn't be shocked if the Saints can add somebody there. And here at quarterback, I'm going to go Desmond Ridder. When it's all said and done, I think that there's probably 3 or 4 quarterbacks drafted in this first round, even though I don't think that should be the case. But Ridder is somebody that had a good combine. He is somebody that's very mobile, and I think he's kind of cemented himself as the 3rd best overall quarterback prospect in this draft class. Next, we are back to the Philadelphia Eagles here. They went center. They went linebacker with our first 2 picks. Here, they could go, defensive back help. They could go edge help. I think you could also argue, wide receiver here for them. And, other than Devonta Smith, who else do they have? Jalen Reagor hasn't really done anything. If you want, to prove that Jalen Hurts is the guy, you need to give him help. Somebody that I really like is Treylon Burks from Arkansas. Yes, didn't have the best combine, but I think, he's a physical guy. I think he can help Jalen Hurts. And I think it's going to be him here in that next range of wide receivers with Jameson Williams, kind of in that range. But I'm going Burks here for the Philadelphia Eagles. Next up, we have got the Pittsburgh Steelers, and boy, oh boy, do they need some help. Quarterback Big Ben retires, but that's probably for the better. I don't think you're going to find a quarterback at this point in time. All these guys are projects when we get outside of the top 3 guys. So offensive line, in my opinion, that's been the biggest need for them for a while last year. I think that's still the case this year. And I'm looking to offensive linemen. I think Trevor Penning is that next best available guy. And that's the way I'm going to go here. You need to open up holes for Najee Harris. You need to protect whoever the hell plays quarterback for you this season because that positional group was absolutely awful last season. Next, we go to the New England Patriots. And again, the Patriots, weirdly enough, they can go in a lot of different ways. Yes, it seems like you hit on Mac Jones, but look, you need help at wide receiver. You need a guy that can be the alpha. Maybe you can land somebody in free agency. That's true. You can also use some edge help. You can use some linebacker help. And J.C. Jackson departing, that opens up a huge hole in the secondary. And honestly, I think that's probably the way that the New England Patriots are going to go. The way of the secondary, to me, the next best available cornerback is Andrew Booth Jr. from Clemson. And, I'm not saying he's going to be an immediate Jackson replacement, but I think he can be a guy that's going to be desperately needed for the New England Patriots and probably will go right around this range where I wouldn't be shocked to see a DB kind of slew of selections begin. Afterwards, we go to the Raiders. What does Las Vegas do here? Well, they're in a division that now includes Russell Wilson, Justin Herbert, and, Patrick Mahomes. So I think you need some defensive help and, either edge rusher or the interior of that defensive line. I think potentially here I go edge rusher a little bit more so. And I'm looking at some of these edge rushers and a guy that I think I really like, not necessarily graded as high here on PFF, but Jermaine Johnson, he had an absolute amazing combine. He had a really good showing in the Senior Bowl. His stock has gone way, way up, and I think he's going to be probably a top 20 pick, so good value in my opinion here for the Raiders with him. Next, Cardinals. That Kyler Murray drama has kind of vanished, I think. And now you just continue to build around him. So the question is, do you go wide receiver since, DeAndre Hopkins not getting any younger, Christian Kirk free agent, AJ Green also not getting any younger, Rondale Moore didn't really impress, or do you go offensive line? I think offensive line is the bigger area of need personally, and I'm looking at the options here. I really like Bernhard Reinman, but I think he's a little bit more of a project. Look at some of the guards here, and I do like Kenyon Green. I think he'd be a good fit with the Arizona Cardinals. And again, this is probably where he's going to be drafted between picks 20 and 32. Then we go to the Dallas Cowboys. And for me here, look, in terms of the offense, you don't really need too many skill position players. Yes, the rumors are Amari Cooper probably going to be traded or released, but you still got Michael Gallup, you've got CeeDee Lamb, Zeke, Tony Pollard, you've got tight end options as well. So you go on the defense, you could go on the offensive line to try and make that a kind of strength again. So Ryman could be a fit here, but I do think that, you can never have enough edge rushers, and George Karlaftis is a guy that, I think he just has been replaced by some more flashier players these last couple of days, but I still think he is a good talent. And again, you can never have enough edge help. So I think this is good value for the Dallas Cowboys. Afterwards, we go to the Buffalo Bills at this point in time. What do they do? Wide receiver, defensive line. Stephon Diggs is still there. You've got some young guys on the come up. I think the Bills honestly just got very unlucky. They were literally a coin toss away from potentially being in the Super Bowl. I'm going to go with an area of need, and I'm kind of going to go with potentially the next best player available at that position. Interior defensive lineman, I'm going Devontae Wyatt here from Georgia. Some people could argue he's the top interior defensive lineman in this draft class. I won't necessarily disagree. So I think this is good value there. Afterwards, we go to the Tennessee Titans, and with them, what's going to happen with Ryan Tannehill? He regressed this season, but the Tennessee Titans were still a good team, just got unlucky in the playoffs, even though I do think they weren't as good as their record would suggest. What do you do here? Do you try and revamp that offensive line? Do you try and add some more edge help and kind of build up that defense? You still got Taylor Lewan, but how much longer does he have left? I think that's a very valid question. But again, some of these guys are question marks at the offensive lineman position. So I'm going to go edge rusher. I think we're getting to a point where there's some really, really good value at edge rushers. I'm going David Ojabo from Michigan to Tennessee. Next, we get to the Tampa Bay Bucks and talk about how one season can absolutely change things. Tom Brady retires. You have retirements on the offensive line. Antonio Brown gone. Boy, oh boy, Gronk probably going to be gone. This is a bad situation for the Bucks. They go from one of the top teams in the NFL to potentially one of the worst teams in the NFL. So what do you do here? Do you go quarterback? I don't think so. I think you have to rebuild that offensive line. I'm looking at some of the guards that might be available. I'm looking at some of the offensive linemen, offensive tackles that might be available. I like Zion Johnson here. Guards are going to be an area of need. So I think this could be a decent fit here for the Bucks and him. Next, we go to the Green Bay Packers. What in the hell do the Packers do? Okay, they retained Aaron Rodgers, and Devontae Adams is going to be back, but you're going to lose a lot of other guys because you paid up for those top two stars. And again, yes, those are the two guys that make the team go, but you're going to get worse at other positions. It's going to include the defensive line. It's going to include the secondary, potentially the offensive line as well. But, look, if you can't sign Devontae Adams long term, then you also need a replacement for him. And maybe this is the year where the Packers finally pull the trigger on a wide receiver and potentially, get that guy for Aaron Rodgers. Yes, you've got Alan Lazard there, but okay, if Devontae Adams leaves, then what? I think Jameson Williams here, yes, he falls because of his injury, but I think he'll still be able to play his rookie season. And I think this is a good value. He's very, very talented. Obviously, Alabama is a wide receiver factory. I like Williams to the Green Bay Packers. Then we go to the Miami Dolphins. For the Dolphins, offensive line was a huge area of need last year. I think it's the case this year as well. And they kind of get lucky. Bernard Ryman kind of just falls to them. Yes, he is raw. He can be a project. I mean, he played tight end up until a year ago, but he impressed with that positional switch. And to me, he's the next best available offensive lineman. I'm going Ryman here to the Miami Dolphins. Then we go to the Kansas City Chiefs. They could go a number of different directions. They could go with somebody opposite Tyreek Hill. They could go somebody in the secondary. That secondary isn't getting any younger. They could go edge rusher. And honestly, that defense had some big question marks last season at certain points in time to kick off the season. You were really questioning it. And I said it before, I think this is going to be right around the spot where you're going to see a lot of edge rushers, some really good value. And Travon Walker from Georgia is a guy that I like. I think he could very well go earlier than this, but in this case, the Chiefs get a really nice steal. Then we go to the Bengals. It's really funny. You see top need for them, just offensive linemen. And I think more likely than not, they will go that direction. But the question is, who do they go at the offensive line position? Is it going to be, a potential reach? Is it going to be somebody that's on the interior of the offensive line? There's a lot of things to look at here. I personally have Darian Kinnard as my next best available offensive lineman. Not all that close either. I think you could argue it's a reach, definitely, but it's a huge, huge area of need. Maybe the Bengals would be best off here, just kind of trading down, but in this version, that's not the case. So I'm just going to focus on biggest area of need. That's by far offensive line. So welcome to the team, Kinnard. And then finally here, we have got the Detroit Lions. And I think here, this is potentially with the last pick in the first round where you could see a quarterback go. And the guy that I'm looking at is somebody like a Sam Howell from North Carolina. Look, only a couple, years ago, I wouldn't say year, but a year ago, he was going to be the number one overall pick. Didn't work out. Didn't have the best 2021 season, but I still think the upside is there and somebody will take a chance on him. I think this is probably right around where he's going to get drafted, end of the first round, early to mid second round, and, can potentially learn behind Jared Goff. So this is the way that I currently have that playing out. But with that, we wrap up this NFL mock draft. And as always, let me hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree? What do you want your favorite team to do? If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at alldaypigskin to continue interacting with us there. And in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.